All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Charter Revision Commission on June 17th to order at 7:01 PM. And I will start with the roll call. James Wolf is here. We have Raul De Jesus,
Present.
John Gale, Alexandra Aponte,
Here.
Arunan Arulampalam.
Here.
Steve Bonafonte is traveling on business and will be joining us shortly. Vicki Gallen Clark, Kamora Harrington,
Here.
Ken Kennedy, Kathleen Kowalishin,
Here.
Melvin Medina,
Here.
Yadira Rivera,
Here.
Bruce Rubenstein,
Here.
Ian Smith. Okay, we have a quorum. The next item on our agenda is public comment. There are no members of the public here on the Zoom call this evening, so we can move ahead to the approval of the minutes from June 3rd, 2021. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second? The motion has been,
Second.
the motion has been properly moved and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. On to the fourth item of the evening, testimony from elected officials. So I believe I was able to reach out to everyone here on the call at some point this week or today. Originally, this meeting was going to be the opportunity for the city's elected officials to come and testify before us. Unfortunately, there were quite a few instances where people had conflicts or weren't able to make it. So we may have Councilman Gale wearing his councilman hat testifying before us later this evening, but most of the elected officials will be instead testifying on July 1st at our meeting then. And so tonight we will have an opportunity for commissioners to provide insights or remarks that they have about changes that they'd like to make to the charter. And we will also be giving folks an opportunity to offer those insights at our next meeting as well after the elected officials speak. And so tonight's, you can be as broad or as specific as you'd like to be while making the suggestions, and we'll take those suggestions and add them to the tracking document that Steve has put together for us. At the meeting next week, once we have everything captured from our elected officials and our commissioners here, we'll have an idea of the complete universe of issues that we'll be taking a look at, and then we can start prioritizing those issues and scheduling working sessions. So Councilman Gale, as I mentioned, may be speaking later, and so we will move on to our fifth item on the agenda, the discussion among commissioners regarding suggested charter changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in order, alphabetical order, with commissioners, and just ask each commissioner to provide their insights and input if they have them. And Attorney Mednick may weigh in with some questions or comments on how looking at those specific issues has turned out in other charter revision commissions. So with that, I will ask Commissioner Aponte, provide you the floor and offer any insights you have.
Thank you. I really am interested in, at this point, just two issues. The first one is the police commission. And the comments or thoughts I have are, number one, what's the jurisdiction of the police commission? What will it be empowered to oversee? Another issue is the composition of the board. Is it 1, 3, 5, 7, etc.? Are they going to all be civilians, or will it be a mix of civilians and people from the department itself? What will be the qualifications of the members, if any? The appointing board, will it be the mayor who will do the appointing, the council? Will they be elected, or will it be a combination of any of the above? Are there any limitations on the commission, particularly statutory or contractual provisions? And staffing, who's going to staff the commission? And my second issue is district elections. As I said, I'm just interested in hearing the different thoughts on it and figuring out where we go from there. Thank you.
Can I just do a little color commentary, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, go for it.
Thank you, Alex, Commissioner. Literally, we're dealing with restructuring a police commission in Hamden as we speak. I've been dealing with two charters. Middletown does not have a police commission. Hamden does. Commissioner Medina is pretty much aware. He actually testified in Hamden, and I'm fighting to preserve one of the provisions he actually recommended, a guaranteed funding source for the operations of the commission. What we have in Hamden is a pre-existing commission. It's in a wonderful place because it's in the collective bargaining agreement as the disciplinary body. And so unlike a lot of civilian review boards or even the commission that we might establish in Hartford, if we go through with your idea of looking at it, you may be looking at the outside, from the outside in, even though we can establish a number of powers and authority, we would have to look at the collective bargaining agreement room to include a new governing body. If the charter establishes a body such as a police commission, can the city effectively negotiate us into the CBA during this period of time? But we would probably be coming in without being in the CBA. So the composition is fairly broad. There's a statute that actually somebody cited to me today. Hamden, we just expanded from 5 to 9. And somebody pointed out that there is a statute in, there's not a statute, a statute that says you can have a 5-member commission. That is a Title VII police commission. Since we're a charter revision community, we are not restricted by the 5 in that statute. So fairly broad in terms of qualifications. Hamden, we've done a pretty robust job, so I won't get into all the details, but you can establish a good diverse qualification base. You want to have some citizens who don't have background. We put limitations on people in the public safety world and an absolute prohibition from anybody in the department, retired from the department, or a family member of the department from serving on a police commission if it's going to be a true oversight board, to avoid personal and financial conflicts. So there are a lot of opportunities, but the big question will be the limitation that might be posed by the collective bargaining agreement. That doesn't stop you from engaging in policy and working with the chief on regulations unless there's something specific in the collective bargaining agreement that prohibits it. And I doubt that there is. So that's just a little commentary on police commissions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Aponte. What we'll do, Councilman/Commissioner Gale has been able to hop off his other council meeting and able to join us. So we're going to hop back into agenda item number 4 and have the councilman address us in that role, that capacity, and to provide some comments on what he'd like to see changed in the charter, issues we'd like to look at, if any. So Councilman Gale, thank you for joining us this evening. You have the floor.
Thanks very much, Chair. My apologies for not being here at the beginning of this meeting. Have we heard from any other council members tonight, or am I the only one?
You are the only one.
I'm it. Okay, I love it.
Right.
So just a couple of things that have come to mind that I really don't know. I don't know to what extent a charter change could actually be effective, but I'm going to throw them out there for folks to think about. One of which I believe other people have already commented on, and this was the issue with our registrar of voters office. We had, and I believe it's still the law. If the Working Families Party were to run a registrar of voters next election, and that registrar of voters were to outpoll the Republican, which is not unlikely because we have so few registered Republicans in Hartford, we would end up in a situation where we would have 3 registrar of voters. And we had that situation for multiple, well, I don't know if we had it for more than 4 years, but we had it for at least 4 years. And I kind of think we had it for almost 8 years. Besides being a total waste of money and very unproductive, it just caused everybody, and they had problems. I mean, I don't think the system set up the problems, but it did call into question, is there a better way to do this? I actually had introduced, when I first got onto council, I had introduced an ordinance change that would have professionalized the office. Unfortunately, I could get no support for that. And so I don't have a whole lot of confidence that we'd get support for changing it now, but it would be interesting to me to be able to look at whether anybody else in the state does it differently. I know I'm fairly certain that the legislature has allowed for a municipality to do it differently. And it might be something that would be worthwhile in Hartford, because we are in that unique position where we could end up having 3 registrar and 3 assistant registrars, mind you, and then having to budget for all of this, which, in the city of Hartford's case, I think we were paying another $150,000 a year and clearly not really getting anything out of it. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2, the city suffers from really poor turnout in elections. The mayor and the city council are elected by, I'm fairly certain it's no more than about 12,000 people who turn out to vote in a city of 124,000. So, we have a 10% turnout. I mean, it's probably higher in terms of the number of registered voters, but it still seems very low. And even when you start comparing us to the surrounding communities, the West Hartfords, the Glastonburys, I mean, communities that have 2/3 of our citizens will produce twice as many, have twice as many people come out to vote for a municipal election. So question, is there something we could do to generate more interest in our municipal elections? Something that we could do in the charter. I mean, there may be 100 reasons, other reasons why our municipal elections are boring. Maybe the quality of all of us is just horrible. And maybe I'm representative of that. I don't know, but I'm intrigued by New York City, which is going to have a primary next week on, I think, next Tuesday. And that primary is, they have gone with ranked choice voting. And this is, they're not the first ones. I believe Los Angeles has been doing ranked choice voting for quite a number of years. I think it will be very interesting to see if the New York City primary does indeed result in a higher turnout for New York. I'm not sure exactly how Hartford could incorporate ranked choice voting, but that's just one idea, potentially other ideas where we could maybe do something in the charter that would help us generate more interest in our elections. Along those same lines, worse than mayor and city council is the Board of Education. The charter, when it came in 2003, set up board elections for that odd year when you're not having council elections. Well, the last 2 board cycles we've had, I do not believe we've had more than 1,700 people come out to vote for the Hartford Board of Education. So again, 124,000 people in the city, 20,000 students in the school system, and 1,700 people are coming out to vote for Board of Education. I'm sure that there are people who are going to come before us and propose that we go to a fully elected board. I don't know if that will, if that would generate any more. I have wondered whether staggering board terms could be helpful, where, you know, 3 people are elected at a cycle to keep some continuity, but also maybe to keep more interest. I'm not sure, but in any event, those are things that are concerned to me, and I don't have any specific proposals, but I would love to hear as we go through this process, perhaps what other folks may have done that, you know, maybe we should consider. So there you have it.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Steve, do you have any color you'd like to provide?
Color commentary. Just 2 things. One, I've never confronted in 25 years the issue of what can we do to the charter to stimulate governmental activity, although it touches on a number of things we have over the years. One of the things, we can't really do much about ranked choice voting because it's a Title IX question, unless we get a pilot from the General Assembly. If, you know, the charter might establish or mandate a call or whatever it may be, but it would be meaningless unless we had state legislation to enable us to do that. But the other concepts that you might look at are staggering elections, as you talked about, and also moving toward a district system, and whether the district system would generate more local activity in each of the districts that would kick the number up in terms of overall voter participation. I've never thought about it from that perspective, but it could very easily do that. And one of the arguments I've always used from the days I served on the Board of Alders in New Haven, where we had at one point 29 Democrats and 1 Republican, and the 1 Republican would always oppose 2-year terms for alderman and 4-year terms for mayor. And I tried to remind him that the only time the Republicans ever won more than 1 seat was during a special election cycle, when local issues really governed in the neighborhood or in the community, in the ward, and somebody who was actually interested and involved in the neighborhood, regardless of party, was able to beat the majority party. And so, you know, so maybe that argument lends itself to the concept of districts as a way of generating that activity. You could do districts for Board of Ed as well, and that may be another way to generate activity. But it would be worth it. I mean, it would be interesting to see if a panel could be put together to just discuss how a local governing document might impact on public participation. So those are my only comments, but I think it's an intriguing subject area.
Okay, anything else, Councilman?
No, not at this time.
All right, well, thank you very much for the comments. We will move back into the discussion with commissioners, and I will go next to Commissioner Aralampolum.
Sure. I'll start off with two things that were brought up just now. One on district elections. I think I would like to also explore, you know, instead of just slate elections versus district elections, whether there could be somewhat larger districts, maybe 3 larger districts across the city, in which the top 3 or so vote getters each get in that area, and so that there's some level of local, some understanding of the neighborhood, some level of local representation, but also kind of de facto ranked choice voting, right? If you have 3 people that you can vote on in your neighborhood, you don't have to go with whoever the party puts forward as your candidate. You can pick other folks that kind of sound interesting to you, and I think that if that sort of structure is allowable, it might be an run around to get to ranked choice voting in Connecticut. So I'd like to look at various kind of models for what a district would look like in that model. The other is on education. You know, I'm sort of open to discussion on what the Board of Ed looks like. But one thing that I think hasn't been brought up is the role of the superintendent. And, you know, the superintendent reports to a board, but not to an individual. You know, we don't have a lot of folks at the city who aren't elected and don't report to a single individual. And I think that for parents, as a parent, when there are issues in schools, it's difficult when there isn't someone above the superintendent that you can go and speak to and put pressure on. And so I'd like to take a look at the structure of our schools and the accountability within schools, and whether there's any interest in having the superintendent sort of report within the structure of City Hall. The other, you know, Alex brought up the issue of a police commission, and I'm very interested to hear about that, hear how that's happened in other cities. I hope we'll bring in folks from other cities to talk about a police commission, and also, you know, and I appreciate Attorney Bednick, your nuance there on the collective bargaining issue. I would love to hear sort of what it would look like prior to collective bargaining, and also, you know, when those collective bargaining agreements are being looked at again, and I'd like to hear from people who might be at the table when those collective bargaining agreements are opened up again, to see how much role a police commission might have in that. And then, you know, the final thing is from city council members. I'd love to hear about the role and the structure of the staff and the council itself within the city council, and how we can ensure that folks feel like they are prepared to take on the role of council and within that organization, both from majority party and minority parties. And so, you know, one other thing I'll say, you know, going back to the conversation on the districts, I would hope that everybody here who is Hartford resident views at least part of our role as ensuring that each group of people and each person within the city has as much representation as possible. And as we have our conversation around districts versus slates and everything else, I hope that is at the center of that conversation, how we increase participation and representation within all facets of our city. So I think that's all I have for now. I will say I'm open to hear other people's ideas. I don't have a solid plan or solid ideas, and I'm also I hope that we'll take each of these ideas and kind of as we've talked about, go around the city and hear from folks in neighborhoods, and get other people's thoughts outside of this group as well.
Great, thank you. Steve?
Just briefly, on the issue of multi-candidate districts, there are communities that have them. I'm not sure if any of them have more than two. Bridgeport has two, Stamford has two, Norwalk may have 3-person districts. Once you go beyond 2, you have basically the same at-large rule that applies for at-large elections. You have minority party representation that takes hold once you go beyond 2. But multi-candidate districts are a way to go. Whether it gets you where you want to be with regard to ranked voting in kind of a circumvention or a way to get there, I don't know whether that would work. But certainly there are experiences. I'm trying to think. So we could put together a good panel, and there is precedent for it. On accountability of the superintendent, in Bridgeport a number of years ago, when Bill Finch was mayor, and it's probably the trigger that cost him his reelection, in effect, he was a part of the mayoral control debate. I think Eddie Perez in this town as well was a big advocate for mayoral control. And the trade-off you have is, do you politicize your system by having a mayor have too much control in the system or not? And I don't have a definitive answer on that. But we could look at models. It would be interesting to see how other communities grapple with the idea of superintendents that basically control the flow of information to a board, as opposed to having a board that's really holding them accountable. And that may be the ultimate issue. But I think the attempt of Eddie Perez, and I think of Bill Finch, John DeStefano New Haven had an all-appointed Board of Ed, is whether or not that really holds superintendents accountable in the ways that you'd like them to be accountable. And so it's a worthwhile issue, and it's one that there's a lot of data on around the state and around the country. And the staffing issue is a good issue as well. It's one that we've tried to discuss in the past. It would be worthwhile to see where the council is and what they'd like to do with their staffing structures.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Arlamplam? Okay. Thank you for your comments. Up next, we have Commissioner DeJesus.
All right, can you hear me, guys?
We can hear you.
All right, let me get a good visual here. So very briefly, I don't want to go too much into the issues as I am still going through a lot of the charter and trying to digest it and understand it and see if it's a document that is easy to understand. I know that there's a lot of information about trying to get more people involved, and I think the charter has to be easier to understand, comprehend. So I think that will be kind of my first issue, and making it a little bit more accessible for people to understand and comprehend. Also, the issue for the Board of Education, it's one that I think the composition, the way that the superintendent is appointed, all that good stuff is something that I am looking into. The commissions and boards and commissions in the city have been one of these silos, or pretty much been in an island, and is a resource that has not really been tapped into. I think there's a lot of people who would want to see, again, more voter turnout. And I think that is a great incubator for people to get involved in the city. But I think they need some teeth and actually have a real role for some. The most popular ones are, I would say one is planning and zoning. But I think the other ones, they need some assistance and some resources. For them
Commissioner DeJesus,
to actually be able to.
we lost you there for a second after you mentioned the resources. Do you want to start again?
See if I can get into better real quick.
Seems like you're having a little bit of audio difficulties. You want to try one more time? If you're still having audio difficulties, we'll come back to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Why don't you try again?
Yeah. So allocating resources for them, being able to create documents and get assistance and have the personnel to be able to provide better information to these agencies that they are supposed to service, Health and Human Services, the different commissions that can assist these departments and kind of be able to create some leadership there. I think the other issue is just looking into the composition of the council. How does that work? Who is elected? When they're elected? It's also a issue that I will like to, have not made up my mind, and none of this I have made up my mind. Just want to understand how it works. I mean, as a former councilman, I have some biases that I have to wean out and look at it holistically, right? And not look at the individuals or how it's run, but is it something that needs some revision? And so that is another area. I think another area that I'm looking into is a corporation council. And it's been a very controversial office for many years. They seem to be kind of like the Supreme Court of our city. And then anytime you have a debate or, whatever they say stands. And then many times this costs the city a lot of money. I think that needs to be looked at, the corporation council and how it works and how they make their decisions, how they come to their conclusions. Right now, they'll issue an opinion by word. 6 months later, they can change that because there's nothing in writing. And so I think that needs to be looked into to see how and when and who appoints. Is it going to be?
Commissioner DeJesus, we lost you again. You were talking about who appoints the Corp Council and how. You there? Okay, we will come back to Commissioner DeJesus. Steve, do you want to offer anything on what he?
I'll hold my comments so he can hear them.
Great. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Up next, we have Commissioner Harrington.
Good evening, everyone. How's everyone?
Good evening.
So let's see. So I really want to talk more next month. I'll be prepared to kind of talk about stuff. I do want to share that first meeting that we had with public commentary was wonderful. And I spoke to some of the folks who came out and spoke to us there. I came into this knowing that my stance was definitely addressing a strong mayor. I've been listening to folks and having conversations, and now I'm going to say that I want to explore that a lot more, but I do definitely want to make sure that we look at and address how to strengthen council. And there, Arun and Nazir are talking about these district elections. I really wanted to look more into district elections and the idea of, I think many people want ranked voting. And Steve, you shared with us during that first meeting that that's something that we can't do here. And I completely understand that. And I would like to have a lot more information. I'm not sure if other people are finding, I know that there are other communities that have stepped into this ranked voting and are feeling good about it. So this is something that people are talking about. I am also very interested in the idea of looking at staggered elections and how that would help out. When it comes to the Board of Ed, I would like us to figure out how to have a fully elected Board of Ed. I want to get rid of any appointments that are happening there. I want to explore the idea of residency requirements for Board of Ed, members, as well as I know we've started to discuss the idea of paying Board of Ed members as elected officials. And these are things that I would like to explore for a bit. I'm not sure exactly where I am there. I do want to make sure that we have a police commission and make sure that police commission is a police commission that has teeth. And I would like to think of that commission in line with the other commissions. So just as Raul DeJesus was just speaking, I would like for us to make sure that the commissions have the ability to do the things that we want them to do, and that they all are kind of in the same equal playing field. The way it works right now, different commissions have been able to change what their rules are throughout. So we don't have an idea of what our commissions are and how they work. So as we create a police commission, I would like to use that as a time to kind of template the way that all of our commissions are going to work. So that structure. But really, I'd like to save questions, comments, and concerns until next month.
Great. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, this is not your one bite of the apple here. If you do have other ideas, within the next couple of weeks or based on the comments from the elected officials, you can certainly weigh in after that. So thank you, Commissioner Harrington. Steve, you have any insights you want to provide on that?
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, and if you keep bringing ranked voting up enough, I'll think even more about it. One of the things we might consider, if that is something you want to think about, is that we tackle it early, even though it's not something you can do in charter revision because you can't change it. But if it's a system that you're interested in, and we don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time, but we can do a couple of really good sessions on it, we're early in our process. If we tackle it, let's say in July, it might, and James is the chairman is a lobbyist. He knows Hartford. I think there's other people in this room that know Hartford. We might want to talk to our legislative delegation to see whether they might be willing to consider will be a February session next year, February session?
Yeah. Yep.
In the February session to see if we can either get a pilot or general authority to move in that direction. And that would give us time before the end of the charter process to institutionalize it for the subsequent election, obviously, for the elections in the future. So that would be a way to tackle the issue early with a possibility or a hope that we might get something through in the short session. Because the other good thing about the short session is it'll be over next May, and we'll probably have 2 weeks or so to act on the basis of what they've done if they act late in the session. So I just wanted to toss that idea as I was thinking about it more and more. If that, it's obviously something that you guys want to explore, that would be the way to explore it if you want to take a realistic look at it, knowing that it's speculative, but that if we take the time early on, we might be able to move in that.
Steve, Representative Elliott from Hamden has introduced ranked choice voting legislation in the past, and I believe it got out of the GAE committee and made it to the House floor. I'm not sure it got much farther than that, but there have been conversations about it. So
I can talk to Josh. He's one of our local people down here in my neck of the woods. But that would be my thought on that. If that's something's of interest to you, that would be a determinant about when to take it into account, because at least you've acted on it. You can make a decision about it at a later stage in the process. I was going to say something else. There was one other thing.
Hold on one second, Steve. Commissioner Aralumpalem, do you have a question about ranked choice voting, or is it just in general?
There's a question about ranked choice voting.
Okay.
Is the reason we can't do ranked choice voting, is that statutory reason, or is it constitutional? In other words,
It's statutory. It's, well, if they're passing legislation or attempting to pass legislation in the General Assembly, I would have to assume that it would be constitutional for them to do it. We can't do it because we don't have enabling legislation that permits us to do it. We need to have an express grant of authority to be able to conduct an election. We don't have.
My question is, if a lot of the election reform sort of initiatives they're being put forward in the legislature as eventual constitutional referendums, right? And you have to pass it in 2 non-consecutive legislative sessions. So I just wanted to get a sense of would it be a statutory change that would, that could hypothetically, if it got a majority vote in each chamber and was signed by the governor, would become law, or would it require sort of 5-year process to become a constitutional amendment?
I don't think it. I will reserve the floor and try to get an answer for you on that. I don't know. I'll give Josh Elliott a call if he's sponsoring the legislation. I'll assume that Josh has done his homework on how that process would work. I was not aware that there would be a constitutional hurdle to overcome. And I doubt very much that anybody in the state would want to have a constitutional convention right now.
You never know.
But I'll talk to Josh and see what I can find out.
Great.
That's it. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Harrington. Commissioner DeJesus, do you want to give your comments one more try?
All right, so where did I leave off? See if we got it. You hear me now? And hopefully I was trying to make sure that video didn't kill my my feed. So hopefully if you can't hear me, you can read my lips.
Yeah, it was Corporation Counsel. I think he was at Corp Counsel.
Yep.
Yeah, so looking into that and seeing how that works, defining what the role is and where things should be done. Also, I think the town clerk's office of how we document things in the city, I think is important that just like the state and many other municipalities, they keep a paper trail of decisions that are made by Corp Council and information that could be very helpful when creating new legislation by council could be very important. And just keeping a better paper trail of their opinions and their standings on certain things, because they tend to fluctuate. And I think that's a luxury for an attorney to have his own, to be the own judge, be the prosecutor, be the defense attorney and all that. So I think that needs to be defined and strengthened. And I think I mentioned the Board of Education, and just a good look at of how we as a city want government to run. I think I've been speaking to a lot of people in the public. I think there needs to be a way that we move away from trying to get certain political ideologies or opinions about, and I hear staffing to be trying to work through the charter. That has to be moved out of the charter and moved into ordinance. So there's been a big push to try to move things into the charter to dictate who does staffing, who does that. I think if we want the city to move forward, we need a quicker solution, right? So, and if you want something to change in a charter, it takes a while to get changed. If you move that authority into the legislative body, they can probably, about 2 or 3 months, they can move an ordinance and they can start to move the city a little bit faster. So I think we need to make sure that if we want to be a city of the future, we need to make sure that our government can make legislations and policy as quickly as possible and responsibly. And I think the charter should be a guide as to how we should operate, and that it shouldn't be the all and be all, because I think it takes a while for the charter to be amended. We're going to spend probably about a year to do that. Then it's going to go to the legislative body. So it's a very long process to make things there. And so I think we just got to look at everything as a whole. That's so far where I've been through in the charter. I am sure that as I keep going through it, I'll come up with a few more things. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Any comments, Steve?
Yeah. Kudos on your charter as the guide theory. We started to do that 18 years ago and did begin to migrate a number of departments out of the charter. So that is something you probably should continue to look at. The issue of the Corp Council is not just an issue in Hartford. We have a former Hartford Corp Council on this body. I'm a former Corp Council in New Haven, and have worked in most of the big cities around the state. The way, and you had Alan Taylor working for a while internally at the council, and candidly, you're not going to find a lot better lawyers than Alan Taylor in his prime and in his retirement.
I agree.
One of the most outstanding people I've known in government over the years and in law over the years. In Middletown, they just voted this year, and we'll see if I know the council will support it because the council wanted it, and we'll see if the voters want it in November, to give the council the ability on its own to hire counsel. Hamden, where I am from, I met Mel because I'm counsel to the Legislative Council, and we were going through a very sensitive police shooting controversy, and Mel and I spent a lot of time working on a resolution to try to ameliorate the issues, et cetera. But I was independent counsel, and as Mel may tell you, there were conflicts between my advice for the council and the advice of the town attorney. And if the council was totally reliant on the town attorney's advice, things might have turned out differently. And I'm not saying it was perfect, that everything we did was the right thing to do. But I do think that having counsel on your side in a legislative body is a useful thing. I'm not saying you need a full-time counsel. I'm not a full-time counsel. But the ability to have somebody offset the role of the Corp Council, and I happen to have great regard for Howard. We went to law school together, and I've known a lot of Hartford Corp counsels. But sometimes Corp counsels forget that they are not decision makers. And one of the rules I had in my office was that we advise the decision makers. And it's our job to facilitate their decisions and not to impede them or not to legalize them to the point where we get the veto. And that the only time we should exercise a veto per se is when public officials are crossing the line into illegality. And that the objective is to try to reach objectives for the mayor, if you're the Corp counsel, or for the council, to help them achieve their objectives, not to impede their objectives. So there are ways to address that issue.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner DeJesus, anything else?
Thus far, that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much. Next up, we have Commissioner Kowalishin.
The only thing I would add, other than all the other prior comments, is to examine how bonding is done in the city, because I think it's increased our debt a lot, and certain things should have gone out to referendums.
Okay, thank you. Steve, anything on that? You're on mute.
I have no specific comment on Hartford bonding. We can look into it and see what the thresholds are for going to referenda. And one of the issues you need to look at, we just did this in Middletown, is the question of whether you are segmenting bond transactions and borrowing transactions to get away with circumventing referenda by splitting
Right.
it up. And that may be, that's one of the things that we've seen in towns. I don't know that it's happening in Hartford, and I'm not making that suggestion or allegation, but that would be one of the issues you'd look at.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Medina. I think he stepped away from, oh,
Sorry
back?
about that.
Okay.
I was getting my dog so he wouldn't bark the entire time, which may happen. So I've got a few things that I wanted to innovate, and I'll try not to, no, there he is. I'll try not to be repetitive, but I do want to highlight some that Attorney Mendick did mention, which is that, sorry, give me 1 second.
All right, we'll come back to Commissioner Medina. Commissioner Rubenstein, do you want to move ahead and then we'll come back to Commissioner Medina?
Well, there was another commissioner before me. Did she leave?
She left, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Democracy works best when the branches of government are equal. And in this case, I'll be interested in giving more power to the council. I am interested in many things. I'll just spotlight 4 or 5. With respect to the bonding issue, you will find in the charter the ability for a referendum if the bonding project is over a certain amount of money. Petitions can be taken out by electors, and I believe the electors must the petitioners must get 5% of the electors in the city. I would like that to be the referendum process to be automatic. Thereby it saves the city money, saves a lot of time for people, and the public can opine on a particular project. Secondly, I am interested in the New Haven experiment of the public financed elections for mayor and the city council. I do not want to be in the position where somebody comes in and spends millions of dollars and buys any elections, whether it's for mayor or for the city council. The public finance elections have worked reasonably well at the state level, and I believe they can work very well here at the local level. with respect to the hybrid system, I'm for a hybrid system, probably 9 and 6, 9 district, 6 at large, because the at large comes under the minority rule statute, and it's divisible by 3, and it comes out to a decent number. And I think that people that live in Hartford will have a defined person within their district. So if the lights go out, or the garbage isn't picked up, or the snow hasn't been done, they'll have a actual person within their district to call. With respect to Board of Ed, the Board of Ed situation was put in 2003 as a result of massive infighting amongst the prior Board of Ed. That kind of infighting has not happened in the generation. I would be very interested in going back to a elected 9-member district Board of Ed, staggered, so that you would have some institutional history. And with respect to police commissioners, I'd be for elected, perhaps 7 police commissioners by district, or maybe 9, with staff, with sufficient staff, with prohibitions, as council mentioned. And I think that's will help invigorate the abysmal voting record with respect to our city. And lastly, I would be looking for and interested in creating elected boards and commissions. They have this in Bloomfield and many other suburban towns, where if you're on redevelopment or housing authority or some other board or commission, you actually run for office. This, I think, creates interest, and with interest, hopefully will create a better voting percentage for us here in Hartford. I have other ideas, but I'm just going to leave these 5 or 6 items for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubenstein. Steve, any comments?
I don't think we have enough time for me to comment on all of Bruce's wonderful proposal. There's a lot. Bruce has obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this. He's been on a commission before. The hybrid system does exist in different communities. Hamden has a hybrid system. Danbury has a hybrid system. Norwalk has a hybrid system. And so there would be a lot of interesting models to look at to see how they work. And going back to the commissioner's comments earlier, we could look and see how multi-candidate districts work within that kind of structure as well, and look at how we might be able to move in that direction. You don't need charter revision for publicly financed elections, although you can mandate it. But again, you're going to need legislative support for something like that. And the elected police commission, Bruce and I have talked about this many times. I will have to examine, there is a statute, and the question is whether we have authority outside of the statute, and we may. And I would have to take a look and see if there's a model for elected police commissions or other elected boards and commissions in other towns. Historically, the larger cities have minimized. In fact, the trend is reducing the number of elected officials to the council, the mayor, in this town, the treasurer, and Board of Education in many towns, and the registrars, but they're state mandated. And so it would be an interesting question if we start moving in the direction of the town meeting towns, the smaller towns, where they do have elected participation in some of their regulatory bodies. And but with regard to the police commission, I'd have to take a look and see what else exists out there.
Okay, great. Commissioner Rubenstein, anything else?
Yes, Steve, you'll find that Berlin, which is almost an abutting town, elects 7 members. They have been doing it for quite a while. New Britain has police commissioners, and many other towns do. It's not an idea that is growing in Connecticut. For obvious reasons, I think we should look at it in Hartford.
Okay. Commissioner Rubenstein, thank you. Commissioner Medina, we
Thank
will
you.
come back to you. You have the floor.
All right, I'll try to be quick, and apologies for that. I'm interested in Attorney Mednick's opinion on the ability to set aside some kind of sunshine provisions in the charter related to collective bargaining agreements. I think what I have witnessed at the city level is often residents don't know what the elected officials are voting on. There's not actually much transparency. There's no requirement. There's a requirement for a public hearing, but what I have seen is just the council will kind of issue the changes in the collective bargaining agreement, but there's no meaningful process. And I think that would be best for city residents across the board to have an outlined sunshine provision in collective bargaining agreements. On the question of police commissions, I see the value if we allow police commissions to have some disciplinary authority, even if it runs, even if it's voided out by the collective bargaining agreement, only because there will be a future negotiation. So providing both the executive branch and the legislative branch with that written in charter allows them in their future negotiations to fix that in the collective bargaining agreement. I'll say that I'm very much in favor of a police commission as a policy making body, only because my firsthand experience with the legislative council has been they're a little gun shy to do policy making for the police themselves. And so if that is the case, then I could see the value of a police commission if the legislative council itself doesn't want to take that on. I see the value in a policy shop for the council and agree wholeheartedly with some form of a mixed at-large and ward style structure, but something like a mini version of the Office of Policy and Management that the state has that works on behalf of the council, I think would be beneficial to address what Attorney Mednick has briefly talked about, which is, in my experience, corporation councils across Connecticut municipalities are great at what they do, but they often function like legislators when they're not supposed to, and they're vetoing policy ideas, not always on the basis of the legality, but sometimes on the political nature of something, which I have found problematic in the past. I'm also in agreement. I agree if it's required, if we should put it in the charter that the legislative council can secure its own independent counsel if needed. I think we're having a conversation in the country and even in Hartford, I think, with some of the decisions that Mayor Bronin has made in regards to the need for addressing mental health issues in the community and I think we're all recognizing that the policing is a blunt tool and not always the best tool for every situation. With that said, I think we should be looking at a restructuring of municipal departments. And if we had something like a commissioner of community health, that both police and fire department report to, because the fire department is doing the kind of the medical outreach and Department of Public Works as well. That way you might have a more centralized process in which there's someone responsible for the health of the community and is approaching it that way, versus residents having to go to each individual department or the mayor themselves. This is something that I'll send it around to council members, but Brooklyn Center in Minneapolis has just restructured their government in that way, and it's been interesting. And I think I'll leave it there for now, and we'll raise some other questions the next time around.
Steve?
Some interesting points. Let me point out, New Britain Police Commission is appointed, Berlin is elected, for the record. a lot of very interesting points that Commissioner Medina raised. The sunshine provisions, literally had this conversation last night in the police commission, in the new charter in Hamden. And I hope you don't mind, but I think this is helpful. In the new charter, what we've tried to do, and this goes back, I'm sorry to say this because it's decades for me, so it means I'm old. But the time I was on the Board of Alders and first started dealing with this on a regular basis, and understanding how the collective bargaining process really minimizes the public and, almost as importantly, the elected legislator of the public, because there's a very short window between the time you come to an agreement between the mayor and the collective and the union. It's about 45-day window, and it starts to click when you have the handshake. It doesn't click when it comes to the council. And so very often we found ourselves with 10 days left or 15 days left and virtually no time to address the issue. And so what I've tried to advise communities over the course of time, and we're starting to put provisions in charters that during the budget process, we require, particularly in things like overtime, because that's one that is really demonstrable, to have the mayor in his or her budget, present the budget and describe how the overtime accumulates. How does it move from year to year? Is it based on incidents that occur in the community, fire or police, or something else? And we specifically lay out the impact of collective bargaining on overtime. So in the budget process, we've laid that out as a first step towards sunshine. I hadn't thought about it that way, Commissioner, but that's in effect what we're doing. In the police commission, we have also said the police commission in Hamden currently has general management and control of the department, working with the chief. Obviously, they don't work it day to day. They're a citizen body. We recognize that. In building on that, we put into their budgetary role, which they currently have, to be able to look at the budget and give their thoughts to the chief and the mayor based on their observations. Again, a collective bargaining component. And we say that they should be making recommendations based on their disciplinary activities and based on their management activities and based on their budget activities on what should happen to a collective bargaining agreement. So that's step 2 in the Hamden Charter, addressing that issue. So those are 2 ways that you can begin to address sunshine when it comes to that. The pushback you're going to get, and we're literally getting it as we speak. I did the chart today. The corporation account, the town attorney is saying, oh, by having, we have a third entity as well, a finance commission we just created that has similar authority. Those entities, you're intruding on the mayor's ability to be the representative of the city at collective bargaining. And the answer from my perspective, and I feel very comfortable with this, is no. We're not at the table. We're not mandating to be at the table because that would pose mirror problems. But what we're saying is that the local appointed and elected officials should have an ability to report to the mayor that we want these 5 things. If we do these, you ask us to approve a budget every year, we want you to make a change so that we can take $500,000 of that overtime and put it into mental health or some other issue or back into education or somewhere else. And so we've tackled that issue. The issue can be tackled. In terms of staff issues, in the past, they keep inviting me back, so I guess the council doesn't dislike me, but I have always said you have 9 staff people, maybe more. You have 1 assigned to each of you. Wouldn't it make sense to go with the New Haven model? New Haven's the only town in the state that has this, that actually has a professional legislative staff that was started in the 1960s by Fred Gross. And I was the beneficiary of that when I chaired the finance committee. I had a fiscal analyst who was assigned to my committee to give me the counterweight against the budget director. Most councils don't have that counterweight. And so I have suggested that. So I think that would be a worthy discussion with Commissioner Gale's, Councilman Gale's colleagues in terms of how the council sees itself in the future and whether or not it can address some of those issues as well. And the final point on your health issue, and I've not done this, but I've read literature. One of the directions that we may take and or the municipalities are looking at is, are we beyond an era where you need to have these departments as independent entities? Shouldn't we be looking at public health and safety as a combined entity where you have a commissioner who the chiefs report to and are part of an entity where they have, or there's a protective services guy? Do you need a separate fire chief and a separate police chief? I know they're different disciplines, but those are areas that you might look at for reform. So I just wanted to, I'm sorry, there was a mouthful there, but Commissioner Medina, I'll blame him.
Any other comments, Commissioner Medina? All right, great. Well, I think that's everyone. So thank you all.
Well, that you, Mr. Chair.
I'm not going to be providing any comments tonight.
Okay.
So I think that's everyone here. So I just wanted to thank you all for your comments, and then Attorney Mendick, thank you for providing the additional comments. I think that's helpful for the commissioners who have not gone through this process to get some understanding about what's happening around the state and what's happened here in Hartford in the past. Before we adjourn, we do have one member of the public, and I want to let them speak. So I will read off the rules for our public comment portion and then provide them an opportunity to speak. So the public comment portion of our meeting will be conducted in accordance with the following procedures. Each person wishing to address the commission shall, upon recognition by the chair, their name, address, and if they represent a group, they must state for the record the name and address of said group or organizations and shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes. All remarks shall be addressed to the commission as a body and not to any individual member. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks or who becomes boisterous while addressing the commission may be barred by the chair from further participation at this meeting unless permission to remain is granted by a 2/3 vote of commission members present voting. During the public comment portion of tonight's meeting, there shall be no debate by the commission, although questions may be asked by commissioners to members of the public through the chair. And with that, I will pull up the timer. And Naya McGlamry, you have the floor.
Good evening. My name is Naya McGlamry, 5 Regent Street. I'm representing myself. So the first thing is I just wanted to ask, because I know earlier Attorney Mednick said that the ranked choice voting could be talked about with the GAE, which I'm assuming is the Government Administration and Elections Committee. Being honest with you, I had to look that up. Anyways, I was wondering if it would be possible to also talk to them about the possibilities and how it is possible to lower the voting age for our city. The only other thing I really wanted to touch on tonight is that I think that, as I said last, well, not the last meeting, but the last time I spoke, is I think that this process needs to be more accessible. I think I spoke kind of on Facebook with Commissioner Wolf last night or this morning, I don't remember, about, if it can't be on public access because, they're broadcasting something else, I think, and in general, I think that it should be on Facebook. A lot of people in Hartford, their main way of accessing media is through Facebook. So, if you want people from Hartford, which I believe you all do, to have access to this process, that is definitely a good way to do it. I also think that it's really important, and I think that one of the commissioners earlier was saying this, but you need to go into the actual neighborhoods. Some people actually don't go on the internet. some people don't have access to the internet in the city of Hartford. And it's really important that you're connecting with the residents in order to, make sure that we're involved in this process. And that means like every neighborhood, like not just the South End or not just, the West End, but every neighborhood. And yeah, and also, as I said last time, and I know I was asked about how we could, or how you could, make it connect with youth, but connecting with youth, because a lot of kids like are really involved in politics. Obviously myself, there's a lot of kids my age and younger who care about politics and whose parents care about their opinions. And if, personally, I think that all like people who are running for anything should be talking to kids, because kids talk to their parents and a lot of parents really value their kids' opinions. So, and I think you should value our opinions regardless of if we're able to vote. So that's all. I just think that this needs to be more accessible. I agree that the charter, there should be a more accessible version of the charter. I have tried reading the charter and gotten very bored because I don't understand lawyer speak yet. But I think the average American reads at an 8th grade reading level. And so I think it's important that we're making it accessible for everyone. Like that is not a moral failing on their part, but it is important to make sure that everyone has access to this information. So that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Naya. Appreciate your comments. And your point's well taken about Facebook Live. We will get back to that at our next meeting. That was a technology issue on our end that was unforeseen with the HPA-TV. So we'll address that. And then the meetings in person in neighborhoods is something we are absolutely going to look at. We're committed to doing that. That's one of the commitments that I made at the beginning of this process. So once we start meeting in person in August, we will start to take a look at that process and most likely go through the NRZs because they're connected to the neighborhoods. But if there are any other suggestions for getting onto the neighborhoods, happy to take that under advisement as well. All right. Well, thank you everyone for a great session. I appreciate it. I will see you all on July 1st at our next meeting. And with that, if there are no objections, we will stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.